You can hear it in gyms, living rooms, and barbershops across the city, especially in barbershops. There's a real buzz about boxing in the air once again. The thrill of Fight Night returns to D.C., and Washington Full Circle starts right now. Welcome to Washington Full Circle. I'm Furman Patterson. Boxing may have once seemed on the decline in this town, but a growing number of big-time fight cards here is proving that boxing in D.C. is not down for the count. Matt Granado goes behind the scenes for a look at why boxing's return to D.C. is delivering a real knockout.
The return of championship fighting to the D.C. Armory on HBO's Boxing After Dark is a big deal to fans and local competitors.
Protect yourself at all times. Touch them up.
The story behind big events like this one are usually told in the small moments that happen along the way. Any look behind the scenes of professional boxing will surely take you inside the gym. That's exactly where this story begins, with the training and discipline the sport asks of its top fighters.
Training camp for this fight is just really grimy and gruely. Getting the weight down, being disciplined with what you eat, it really gets you on the edge, gets you in the fighting mode.
And a lot of people just see the finished products, guys throwing that level, punching each other, but they never see what goes on before you get there. It's a lot that goes on before you even get there. You can play basketball, football, baseball. You can't play boxing. You can't play boxing.
I want to. I want to. I want to. I will be shining on Saturday night. I want to. I want to. I want to.
Training and mental focus go hand in hand, no matter what your weight class when you're preparing to step in the ring and exchange punches with another boxer.
We have to do so much. We gotta run, we gotta spar. It's not just boxing training, you got strength and conditioning. It's multiple sports all up in one.
The stakes raise even higher when preparing to fight in front of family and friends. 4 fighters on the card are D.C. natives and are eager to show off in front of a hometown crowd.
I feel very good, excited, fighting in my hometown, Washington, D.C. They're more excited than me. I get calls, everybody hit me up on Instagram, Facebook, T-shirts, tickets. It makes me want to push hard. It's motivation for me alone.
That includes heavyweight boxer Tony Thompson, who is headlining the main event. He's fought in 46 bouts during his career. This will be his first at home in Washington, D.C.
I don't get an opportunity to enjoy my craft in front of my family and friends. I'm usually in somebody's hometown, destroying their hopes and dreams. So now I got to get to destroy some of my hopes and dreams in my hometown. It's an absolutely wonderful feeling.
Tony Thompson speaks with confidence and certainty.
Who the only person to beat King Kong? Godzilla, baby. So for this fight, I'm not the tiger. I'm Godzilla, baby.
It's a pervasive trait you'll find with boxers from the opening match on the card
I'm with heavyweight contender Luis Ortiz
to heavyweights who have recorded dozens of knockouts on a quest to win a world championship.
Knockout. Full knockout.
Knockout. Knockout. It's coming.
Talk like that, music to a promoter's ears. In the final days leading up to the fight, the drama ticks higher as boxers finally see one another face to face for media events and, of course, the official weigh-in.
149 pounds, Rashidi Speedy Ellis.
The best fighting the best, and always the fans win.
That's a lot of tension right there, Bernard. Get in there, Bernard. There you go. All right, gentlemen, thank you.
The room, electric, with excitement from the sports enthusiast who sense a reemergence of boxing in the district.
It's phenomenal. I think it's great to bring boxing back to D.C. This card, and then there's another card coming up in April. More boxing fights, the better. More fans will come out.
D.C. is a boxing town and has a storied history of in both professional boxing and professional wrestling. A lot of local fighters and a lot of national fighters that want to come and fight in D.C.
Former professional boxer Bernard Hopkins has had plenty of fights here in D.C. He knows what an event like this can do for a local competitor's career.
HBO Championship Boxing is a big outlet for prospects and also champions to showcase their skills. And what better place than DC? They always support boxing here. They love boxing here.
Without question, you're going to get a big crowd because of the fact that Tony Thompson's from Washington, D.C. And there's just a million fight fans here. People love boxing here.
The fighters' preparation is just one part. Across town at the DC Armory, the crew is busy building the ring and setting the stage for a live broadcast. While the week has been filled with excitement and spectacle outside the ring, intense preparation for the event about to take place inside the venue has been going on. HBO Boxing brings in about 75 people to work on the production, making the boxers we see live as well as on TV shine. They'll spend about 3 days building the set for the broadcast, but game day is when the pressure turns up.
We're usually here about 8 hours before we go on the air. Even though everything's all set up, we're here, we rehearse, and then rehearse some more to make sure everything goes, flawlessly.
Then finally comes the moment the fighters have been working towards and the crowd eager to experience.
Catch these gloves up.
People only get to see the fights. They never get to see the sacrifice, the discipline, the hard work that us boxers put in, and just the courage and the heart it takes to get in the ring. The average person can't do what we do, can't get in the ring.
Luis King Kong Ortiz.
Wow, you can see the crowd is really eating it up. DC loves boxing. Now, this may not be the neighborhood barbershop, but these two men know all about the business of boxing and can talk smack with the best of them all day long. Eric Moses, Senior Vice President for Sports and Entertainment at Events DC, and Mike Walters, matchmaker, booker, and manager of professional prize fighters at Walters Boxing, LLC. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for
Now,
having
as you see, we just have a few minutes, a few seconds to talk before we go to break. But the crowd at DC Armory, what brings them out?
Top-notch fights. As was said in the piece, DC is a boxing town, has been for many, many decades, and people get fired up about seeing prize fighters come and hone their skills against the best in the nation's capital. Everything you do in Washington, D.C. is on a grander stage because it is the nation's capital, and so boxing is one of those things that people get excited about.
Terrific. We'll be right back. More on the culture and the business of boxing's return to D.C. with some of its strongest promoters. Washington Full Circle will be back in a moment. And welcome back to Washington Full Circle. The fight game is back in D.C. and in a big way, and our guests are in the center of the action. So, Mike, you actually deal with some of these prize fighters that's coming in and out of Washington. Tell us your role.
It really matters what promotion it is. In some aspects, I work as a manager for a couple of fighters. At other times, I do matchmaking, where I'm negotiating contracts, purses, weights, things of that nature.
Now, D.C. has a rich boxing history, as we know, but there seems to be this resurgence. What's causing that at this particular time?
In my opinion, a lot of that has to do with the talent that is coming out of the district and the surrounding areas. I mean, guys want to be able to fight, especially as they're moving up in ranks. They want to fight in their hometown. They want to fight in front of their family and friends, and so that's been a real boon to our business that over the last, frankly, 5 or 6 years, and bringing more large-scale boxing matches to Washington.
Now, you're bringing them to the DC Armory. Tell us about that venue for boxing.
Rich history. I mean, this first kind of resurgence started in 2011 at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center when Lamont Peterson, a DC guy, beat Amir Khan for a championship, for 2 championship belts. And since then, we've had 7 title fights at the DC Armory since 2011. So it's helping us a great deal to have guys who want to fight in front of their home crowds. The DC Armory had Larry Holmes fight in the 1970s. It's had lots of really big names fight there. And as you know, I mean, the Armory was the convention center before we had a convention center.
Yes.
So anything big happening here was happening there.
Now, we mentioned local star power, the Peterson brothers, Lamont and Anthony. Who are some of the other big fighters from D.C.?
I mean, you've got Dusty Hernandez Harrison, I would say outside of the Peterson brothers, is the biggest name out of the district. Now, in the outlying areas, you have all the kids from No Excuse, Demetrius Ballard, Lamont Roach Jr., Kevin Rivers Jr. Those guys are all great. Mike Reed, who signed with Top Rank, is a fantastic fighter. You know, Bob Arum's the best in the biz, so if he signed Mike Reed, he must be really good. You've got Tony Thompson at heavyweight. A few years back, we had Seth Mitchell, who was making a lot of noise at heavyweight, who not only was he was a great standout high school football player in this area, then he was a standout player at Michigan State who went on to be about this close to fighting for a heavyweight championship. So, I mean, there's a lot of good kids coming out of this area. You have the Russells. There's about 19 Gary Russells.
We actually had the whole family, the father and the 4 sons on the show here. They're a terrific family.
Well, yeah, one's a world champion, one's going to be going to the Olympics, I believe, and the other one is 5-0 now as a pro.
Now, we've heard all the excitement at the Armory. How do you get HBO interested in these fights here in the city?
Well, I think people like Mike are putting together great matches, and those great matchups are going to attract the large broadcasters like HBO and Spike TV and Showtime and others. And so once they know that there's a good match or several good matches to be broadcast, and those guys want to come to Washington, that's when we start talking to the broadcasters about it.
Now, we see that there's boxing, but Events DC controls a lot of sports and entertainment in the city. Give us a rough idea of that.
Yeah, I mean, our job as the official convention and sports authority for the district really is to sell this city as the premier destination in the world for all things from conventions and trade shows to sporting events and entertainment events. And so, as I said earlier, anything happening in the district makes it necessarily bigger because this is a grand stage, just being in Washington with all the monuments and all the great and rich history that goes on in this city. We believe that bringing your event, whatever it may be, and especially boxing events here, is putting it on a platform that's only going to benefit the production, the broadcast, and the fighters.
What a lot of people don't realize is that there are a lot of gyms in the city, and Maryland and Virginia also. How important are those gyms to sort of growing the next generation of champions?
I think that's the most important thing is Washington, D.C. metropolitan area has the best gyms in the world outside of maybe Southern California. Most of your national champions are coming from this area. I mean, I couldn't even begin to name how many national champions have come out of this area. You've got old school boxing in Fort Washington. You have No Excuse in Maryland. You have Bald Eagle Recreation Center, but the team that fights out there, they call themselves Headbangers. I mean, that's Lamont and Anthony. That's where they train. A lot of world-class guys train there. And so for the kids to see all these world-class fighters training, I think that gives them even more inspiration to want to get to that next level.
Now, at the event itself, at the Armory, for people that have never been to a boxing event like that, what happens? How many people are generally on the ticket?
It's usually going to be between 6 and 8 or so fights on the card, with the last fight being the main. And usually, in our experience, there's a what's called a co-main, which is the penultimate fight, the one before the last fight. And those are going to be usually the fights that are for world championships, if there are world championships at stake during that card. So you can come, doors may open at 6 o'clock, and the main fight may begin at, say, 10 o'clock, depending on how quickly other fighters get dispatched earlier in the card. Yeah, so if you have a lot of knockouts, then it can move more quickly. But otherwise, prime time is usually when the televised fights are going to happen. Say around 10 o'clock would be the time for the main fight.
What's a typical boxing fan? Paint a picture of who comes out to these things.
It's really across the board. It is real across the board. You have guys who are coming out who aren't necessarily fans of boxing, but they're fans of that fighter because they knew that kid's father or they knew that kid's mother. They worked together, so it could be, or then you have the hardcore fans who are driving in from New York because they really want to see Saddam Ali fight Jesse Vargas, or they want to see a Luis Ortiz fight a Tony Thompson. There's guys coming from all around.
And they're usually the loudest ones in the audience, right?
Exactly. And these are the ones who are buying T-shirts, who are, coming in and they're generating revenue for the city by staying in these hotels, going out to restaurants and doing things like that. So that's why I think it's vital that Events DC continues to work with these promoters to bring these big events here, so these local fighters have a stage to fight on, and it generates more revenue for the city, and that benefits all of us.
That benefits all of us. More in a minute when the business and culture and spectacle of big-time boxing in D.C. returns. Washington Full Circle will be back in a moment. And welcome back to Washington Full Circle. Big-time fight cards, prize fighters talking smack, and televised matches. It's a capital moment for boxing in D.C. once again. Now, Eric, you can tell me more about this. There's a D.C. commission, boxing commission, which I think has some new members this time around. So there's even a resurgence of that commission. Tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so the D.C. Boxing and Wrestling Commission is really the regulatory body that is in charge of ensuring that officials and boxers and all the participants are officially and appropriately licensed. Medical staff, the doctors who are ringside doctors, et cetera. You cannot have a resurgence of big-time professional boxing in your city if your commission is weak. People have to know, fighters have to know, and I'm sure Mike will agree, that when they come to a city to fight, they're going to have a fair fight. It's going to be judged by professionals. The doctors there are going to understand what needs to happen in order to care for them. And so that goes a long way. We have a new chairman named Adam Weirs and a couple of new commissioners. And one thing I will say in my experience of working with the Boxing and Wrestling Commission, it's been very professionally run. And I think we're going to have an extension of that and an expansion of that with this new leadership there.
Because with boxing, there's sometimes drama in the decision itself. Sometimes it comes down to that. What are some of the things that typically happen when there's a decision to be made by the Boxing Commission?
You know, as far as if there's an issue with the scorecards, things
Right.
like that, well, there's going to be an investigation, and they're going to see, they're going to go back to commission, they're going to rescore the fight themselves and see how this judge may have come to that conclusion, and if it's, things can be overturned. There was an issue a few years back with Lamont and Amir Khan. There was a lot of controversy about that. It ended up still working out in Lamont's favor. I agreed with it. The point should have been deducted from the guy. You can't push a guy's head down, but because it was in his hometown, that got over-scrutinized, I believe. But there's a lot of things that take place backstage that most fans don't, quite get or understand what's going on.
Right. Now, at the boxing match itself, how much does that help the city in revenue? You talked a little about the hotels and things like that, but generally, what are we looking at as far as boxing card in DC?
I mean, most of these cards are going to draw anywhere from 3,000 to 10,000 people to watch. And that's significant. Now, you never know exactly how many of those folks are coming from within the district or the DMV and how many of them are coming from, as Mike suggested, other fight towns like Philly and Baltimore and New York that are driving down, that are going to come for the weekend and stay in a hotel and eat in our restaurants. That's what we hope for, because those dollars are incremental dollars that flow into the city's coffers and tax base. And really the reason why Events DC is around to do what it does is to encourage those kinds of people, tourists and visitors, to come to the city for the events that we help to put on.
How can folks know about the next boxing event in DC?
Definitely go to eventsdc.com. All of the fights at the Armory will be sold on Ticketmaster, so Ticketmaster.com is another way to search for what's going on. But I will tell your viewers who have not had the unique experience of coming to a live boxing match, a prize fight, that they should do so. It has and I'm sure Mike would agree, it has a different energy to it than any other kind of sporting event that you can go to. It's an eclectic group of people, young, old, the kinds of folks who look like they may have just come from the country club, as well as people who may have come from other kinds of clubs, right, to get there. So it's an experience that if folks haven't had, that I would highly suggest they look into.
There's a level of pageantry at a boxing event that you won't see at any other sporting event. Like he said, I mean, there might be a gentleman in a fur coat and a woman who looks like she's wearing a prom dress or a gown. And then there's a guy in a t-shirt that says Budweiser with a stain on it, but they're all there. And they could be sitting right next to each other in the front row. I mean, you don't know what you're going to see. And that it's just an event like no other. I mean, seeing two heavyweights land those punches, you feel that. You feel that in those first few rows, and you're taken aback, like, oh my goodness.
All the sweat and the blood.
Yeah, I mean, you may get it on you, depending on where you're sitting.
Now, what I found interesting was years ago when boxing was big in D.C., there were the newspapers and the sports writers that reported. Today, they're bloggers, and there's a lot of bloggers here in D.C. and the metropolitan area. How does that help things?
I think it helps to get the word out. You know, there are many more news sources out there now that are covering this, and some that are devoted just to boxing. We happen to be fortunate in this area in that one of the primary voices in covering boxing in the media, Dan Raphael, is right in our backyard in Virginia, and so he knows a lot about what goes on and helps to put out a lot of information about the fights that are happening around here. But we have many more sources, and all the fights that we host at the Armory, the media credentials are numerous. I mean, probably a couple dozen for every single fight that we do. We think that only inures to the benefit of the city, of the production, and of the boxers.
Now, one name I hear a lot is Gary Digital Williams, Boxing
Along the Beltway.
Yeah.
Blogspot.com. Gary, I started writing about boxing. That's how I got involved with boxing. I wrote about boxing for BoxingTalk.com when it was basically one of the top dogs in online boxing coverage. And Gary was very instrumental and very helpful with me kind of advancing my career and learning about boxing. That guy is an almanac of everything DC boxing. If it happened within a 30-mile radius of DC and it involves boxing, he knows every detail of it, and he was probably there.
Great website, great blogging site. Well, I want to talk about one other thing that's sort of been in the news over the last year is women's boxing, because it seems to be stemming from a major event, some dramatic event. Tell us about that.
Well, I think, you know, you've seen a rise of women's boxing over the years, probably starting most with Layla Ali and all of the attention she got several years ago as a professional fighter. But recently, the U.S. Olympic boxing team has had much more success, I would think, on the female side, frankly, or as much success on the female side as they have on the male side. Locally, there are some promoters, female promoters and female boxers that have done some smaller fights in hotel ballrooms and maybe even at the convention center. So it's on the rise.
Another whole show. I'd like to have you guys back soon. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That's it for Washington Full Circle. Thanks to our guests and thanks to you for watching. We'll see you again next time.